For our first unit, we're going to be talking about finding subjects and verbs in sentences. As we start this, I want to kind of point out that this is the one area in the class where what we're focusing in on is kind of more pure theoretical grammar, labeling something in a sentence. As we move into later parts of the course, we're going to be actually identifying parts of sentences that we will then be fixing, places where there might be errors. And so in some ways, this section, while it may on the surface seem like the simplest part, it is also the part that, because it's really focusing in on labeling, may feel the most difficult in some ways. I also want to acknowledge that finding subjects and verbs is not a real world skill in and of itself. It's not something where you're going to go to a job site and have somebody actually ask you to find subjects and verbs, probably. But it's a skill that's necessary for us to do all the later kind of work that we're going to do during the course. So let's begin. When we're finding subjects and verbs, we need to start basically with a simple definition. So in a sentence, the subject is going to be the actor in your sentence, and the verb will be the action in the sentence, the thing that the actor is performing. There might be other actions and other nouns, people, places, or things, but in the sentence, what we're really going to be concerned about here is going to be those specific drivers, the action of the sentence and the who or what that is doing that action, the subject. When we're finding subjects and verbs, I want you to be finding the verbs first. They're usually a little bit easier to locate, and there's also usually less of them. And so again, keep in mind that what we're looking for when we're trying to find verbs is the action of the sentence. So some sentences with action words highlighted here. John laughed at the joke. Mary ran to the store. The school opened at 7. So in this sentence, this first one, the laughing is the thing that's happening here. In the second one, running is the thing that's happening, the action that's occurring. And in the third one, opening is the action that's occurring. Keep in mind that all forms of to be, kind of the words that show existence, are always going to be verbs. There's lots of words that are always verbs, but these ones are words that students sometimes forget are verbs. So keep in mind that the words is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been, all those kinds of words, they will always be verbs in a sentence. So for example, in the sentence, John is a joke, the action of that sentence is to equate John and a joke. In the sentence, Mary was at the store, the action of that sentence is to place Mary at the store. In the sentence, the schools were good, the action of that sentence in the past tense is to show that the schools existed in a state of goodness. They were good at that time. Additionally, linking verbs, substitutes for kind of be, being, words like to seem or to feel or become or appear, they are also verbs. So, for example, John seems sad. The action there is to show that he is seeming in this state of sadness. Mary becomes angry, becomes would be a verb. The bus appeared from nowhere. Appear, it suddenly exists from nowhere, and appeared would be the verb there. Verbs are what show us the tense of a sentence. They show us whether a sentence is happening now, or is it's happening in the past, or if it's going to be happening in the future. And so those actions, the same action, changes to show us whether that action is happening now, in the past, or in the future. So for example, John seemed sad. That form of seem shows us that it happened in the past, while John seems sad, basically the same verb there, but now it's happening right now. And John will seem sad. You'll notice by adding that word will on that, which is a helping verb, and we're going to talk a little more about helping verbs in the next lecture, that shows us that it's going to happen in the future. As we're looking for verbs, there are a few words that are kind of commonly mistaken for verbs but aren't actually verbs. And so one of those is words that are preceded by the word to. We call these infinitive verbs. And so in a sentence like this, I want to read the book, the action of that sentence is really that I want something. I'm not actually reading the book. So by putting the word to in front of read, reading becomes an activity that I want to do. So again, the action there is to want, and to read then is not going to be your verb. John plans to enroll in college. Same thing is happening here. Planning is what John is doing, but enrolling is what he plans to do. So once I've put to in front of it, it becomes an activity. It becomes a thing rather than an action for that particular sentence. Now, if enroll was the verb of the sentence, it would be something more like John enrolled in college or John enrolls in college. But again, in this case, John's not actually enrolling in the sentence. Adverbs are words that describe a verb, so they tell us something about the verb, maybe the way in which the action was performed. Most adverbs end in ly, so that's one way of noticing them. The words not and never are also adverbs, and again, these are never going to be verbs. So for example, I drove recklessly to the hospital. Recklessly is telling you how I drove, but drove is the action. I slowly disarmed the bomb. Slowly is telling you how I'm disarming it, but disarming is the action itself. Again, keep in mind that not and never are also adverbs. So he never ate a sandwich. Ate's the action, and never is not going to be an action there. John did not forget. Did forget is the action. Not is telling you how he did forget, which is, he did not forget. So words like not and never, they negate the action, but they are not the actual action itself. Once I've found the verb in the sentence, it's pretty simple then to move back from the verb to find my subject. So keep in mind that the subject, again, is the actor that's performing the action. And so a question that you can ask yourself once you've found the verb is, who or what is performing this action? And the who or what that's performing that action is going to be your subject. So in the following sentences, let's say I've got John reads the New York Times. Again, I'm going to find my verb first, reads. I can then ask myself who or what is reading the New York Times. And here it's clear it's got to be John. Now, in that one sentence, both John and the New York Times are both nouns, but the logic of asking who or what is doing the action tells me that New York Times cannot possibly be my subject because the New York Times isn't reading anything. Only John is the subject there. John is doing the reading. The store opened at midnight. Again, I find my verb first, opened. Who or what opened at midnight? It's got to be the store. Amanda hates Roger. Hating is the action there. And then again, I ask myself who or what is hating Roger? And there it's got to be Amanda. And again, there I got a very simple sentence with Amanda hates Roger, two nouns there, Amanda and Roger. But I know that Amanda must be my subject rather than Roger, because if I look at that verb, hates, and I ask myself, is Roger hating anyone? Not in this sentence, right? Only Amanda is doing the hating there. Pronouns are stand-ins for nouns, and they can also act as subjects. So for example, I've just replaced the subjects in the previous sentences with pronouns. So reads the New York Times, reads is still the action, and then I ask myself who or what is reading it, and in this particular version it's going to be he. What opened at midnight, and again here it's going to be it, meaning the store. Who hates Roger, here it's going to be she, so she will be the subject there. There are a couple of words that can kind of trick us a little bit sometimes with finding subjects. So keep in mind that if a verb ends in ing, sometimes it's the verb, but sometimes it could act as a noun. Sometimes it can act as a subject. So again, on this first sentence here, reading hurts the eyes. Again, I look for my action of the sentence, and I might look at reading, but it's pretty clear that nobody's reading in the sentence. What's happening here is that something is hurting the eyes. And so the subject then, the who or what that's hurting the eyes, is the activity of reading. So reading becomes my subject here. Listening requires full attention. Again, nobody's actually listening in the sentence. A sentence that had listening as its verb would be something like, I am listening to music. But in this sentence, something is requiring full attention. Requires is the verb. And the thing that's requiring the full attention, the who or what, is that activity, listening. Walking increases health. Again, nobody's actually walking in that sentence. What's happening is that something is increasing health. So increases is the verb there, and my subject is going to be walking. Commands can get a little tricky. So with a command, we're telling the subject to do something. So in a sentence like the following, mow the lawn, the action there is to mow. And again, if I use my trick of saying who or what is going to mow the lawn, it's not the lawn that's mowing anything. So the subject is not actually in the sentence. It's what we call an implied you. It's whoever I'm talking to. So my verb is going to be mow, and my subject would be an implied you. Take out the trash. Again, my action is to take. It's not the trash that's taking anything. It's whoever I'm talking to. So again, my subject there is an implied you. Eat your vegetables. Again, eats the action. And so my subject is an implied you. Keep in mind also that adjectives that describe a noun are not the subject itself. So for example, in the sentence, the big red car eluded the police, my action is eluded. And what is eluding the police? It's just the car. Big and red tell us which kind of car, but it's the car itself that's eluding the police. So car will be my subject there. If I have a sentence like the following, her car eluded the police, in that sentence I'm using a possessive pronoun, her. And again, any possessive word, so if I changed her to Amanda's car eluded the police, her or Amanda's just tells you who owns the car, but it's still the car itself that's eluding the police. So what's eluding? It's the car. So even though the word her sounds like it might be a person, and it does refer to a person, it's not the subject of the sentence. That's something to kind of keep in mind, that a subject is not necessarily a person. Again, a subject is the who or what that's doing the verb in the sentence. And again, that's why we need to find the verb first, because we can't actually have a sense of who or what is doing an action until we know what the action itself is. So the action is the first step, finding that action first. In our next lecture, we'll talk about some ways of helping us kind of pare down sentences a bit to find subjects, and we're also going to talk about helping verbs.